Welcome back to this video series of C++ programming. This is the lecture 9 of this video series. Today we'll see how we can pass an object to a function and how we can return an object from this function in C++ programming. This is going to be a very simple topic, so let's get started. We'll first discuss how we can pass an object to a function. Objects are passed to a function through the use of the standard call by value mechanism. So there are two ways the values can be passed to a function. The one is through a call by value and another is through a call by reference mechanism. In the call by value mechanism, we are passing the actual value to a function and which is collected in the another variable. But in the call by reference mechanism, we are passing the address of a very particular variable in that calling function and we will be collecting that as a function pointer or pointer in that called function or in the argument of the called function. So in this topic, we'll discuss how we can pass object through a call by value mechanism. This means that a copy of an object is made when it is passed to a function. So for example, we have created a new function and inside that argument of that function, we have specified the name of object, the class type and the name of object. And when you are calling that function and passing an object to that function, we are actually creating a new object in the called function. Right, so whatever the arguments we have passed or whatever the arguments we have specified, that is a new object, and when the function is called, that new object is created. The second point, the normal constructor function is not called when the copy of the object is made. Instead, copy constructor is called. So what is constructor? Constructor is the one function that is typically used to initialize the different data members of an object. So when you create an object, as soon as you create it, the constructor function is called. By default, the compiler will create a constructor function for you. But if you want to override that function, then you can create your own constructor function. And inside the constructor function, we'll write a code that will initialize the data members to a user-defined data values. So when you pass an object to a function, you want the current state of the object. If the constructor is called, when the copy is created, initialization will occur, possibly changing the object. We'll talk about this important point when we see an example. The third point, when function terminates, the copy of object used as an argument is destroyed, the destructor function is called. So there is another function called as a destructor. So constructor is someone used to construct something and destructor is to destruct something. But what does it destruct? So many times when you create an object, will allocate some memory dynamically. So using some malloc or calloc functions or the new in C++. When the role of that object is finished, we want that memory to be made free so that it can be utilized for another part of a program. If we don't free that memory, then it is wasted. So for that purpose, the destructor function is used. In case of a function object which is passed to a function, and whenever we exit that particular function in which we are passing that object or the object is created in that function, and as soon as we exit, that object is destroyed. So let's see this how we can pass an object to a function through an example. So first I'll create one entry function here, main, and inside this, then I will specify this IOStream header file, and this using namespace string. So to support the input of the operation, we'll create one class here, say C1, and inside this we'll create some data members and the member functions which are public to this class C1. So data1 is the member variable. I'll write one more function called as display data, which here when we inside this display data function will pass an object. So if you're passing the object, we must collect this as an object, so we have to specify the type of that object. So what will be the type? The type will be a name of the class, that is C1. So C1 is here, C1 here is a user defined data type. and then the name of that object, say temp object. Now with this temp object, we can access this data1 member. So here we will print the value of this data1 to the console window. And inside this main function, we'll create another object of the class, say object1, and with this object1 we can now display, we can actually access the data1 variable because it is a public, and we can also access this data member function. First we will initialize this data1 to a value, say 30, and then this object will call this display data function that will display the content of this data1 variable. But here when we call this function, we must specify the correct argument. So in this case we are collecting as an object, so we must also specify the object, and that is the name of object. So in this case the object1 is the name of this new created object, and we are passing this to this function. When we do this, the content of this object1 is copied into the content of this new object temp object, and this object is created when we call this function, so which is a which comes under the scope of local scope of this display data function. So as soon as we exit this function, this object will be destroyed, and then with this object we can access all the data members. So let's compile the program and let's see what does it output. So it is outputting value as 30. Why 30? Because we are initializing this value 30 here, and then we are displaying the same value through this temporary object. So the content of this object1 is copied into this new temp object. So this is how we can create how we can pass an object to a function. Then we discuss about this second point, the constructor function or copy constructor function is called. So why we need the copy constructor function? Suppose when we create this object, as soon as we create the object, a normal constructor function is called, and the constructor function, as we know, is typically used to initialize the data members of the class. So suppose when we create this object, one constructor function is called that will initialize all the data members to a default values, let's say 0, and assume this constructor function is created by the compiler. In the next statement, we are changing the data1 value to a new value, that is 30. So the original default value is now overwrite with this new value 30, and here we are passing this object and collecting into this new object temp object. So what we want here is we want the current state of this object1, and we want to copy into this temp object. We don't want the original state. So when you create this object, another constructor function will be called, and if the normal constructor function is called, like in the case of this object1, that constructor function will again initialize this data1 variable of the temp object to its 0, the default value. That means the current state of this object1, which we actually want in this object temp object, will be lost because we have replaced the data1 with the default value of the through this constructor function. So to avoid this, rather than the normal constructor, a copy constructor function is called. So that will actually copy the content of this object1 into the content of the object temp object. Now let's see how we can return an object from the function. When an object is written by a function, a temporary object is automatically created that holds the return value. It is this object that is actually written by the function. After the value has been written, this object is destroyed. Let's see how we can return an object. For that purpose, I will create another function that will I will call this as a get data, and it will return a object. So for that purpose, I will create another object here, and I will call this as a temp object. It's a this temp object. I will initialize this data member pair on value, and then I will return this object. So how to return? You have to specify this return keyword and then the name of that object. In this case, it's a temp object. So we are returning this object from this function. So as we are returning the object, we must specify some proper data type here. So what is the data type is the name of that class. So C1 is the name of class, and it is also a user defined data type. Here I will create another object of the same class C1 and call this as object2. And inside this object2, help of this object1, I will get the data, or can specify the object2 here. So we're calling this function get data for this object2, and we're returning the content of this temp object and collecting into this new object, object2. When we do this, before this, as we know, this is a temporary variable or temporary object. So as soon as we exit this function, this object is destroyed as it is stored into a stack. But before getting it destroyed, the content of this temp object will be copied first into this object2, and then this object will be destroyed, and I will print the value of this uh, object2 data1 member here. Now let's compile the program and let's see what does it outputs. Now it is outputting the first value as 30 and the second is 40. So 30 for this and 40 for this data1. So when we are returning value of 40, we are actually copying this temp object into this object2. So this value is also get copied. 40 of this data1 is also copied into this object2 data1. Alright, so this is how we can return an object from a function. Similar to passing and returning an object, we can assign one object to another object in C++. But for that, both objects must be of the same type. Then only that assignment is possible. Second point, the data of object on the right side is copied onto the data of object on the left side by bit by bit. Let's see how this object assignment works. So here we have created two objects, object1 and object2. We have initialized this object1 with the value 30, and in the object2 we are collecting the value as 40. Now I will write this statement. So what it is doing, it is assigning this object1 to object2. That means it is copying the content of this object2 into this object1. And when this happens, let's print the content of the object1 variable or data1 variable of the object1. So as we know, this value is 30 here, the data1 is 30 here, but since we are now assigning the object2, the content of object2 must be stored into the object1. That means this original value 30 must be overwritten with the new value. The new value is this 40. So let's compile the program and let's see what does it outputs. So this is outputting the 40. So this is what we are expecting. Alright, so I hope now we have covered all these three topics, and I hope now you have understood the concept, how to pass an object and how to return the object from function, and how to assign one object to another. So this is all from this video. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for the next video.